Luke Sullivan, also known as the Gym Trainer, is a fighting game character from the Street Fighter series. He first appeared as the final character in the Season 5 character pass of Street Fighter V and is the ultimate playable character in the series. In Street Fighter VI, he returns as the main narrative hero and serves as the coach for the player-customized character in the World Tour game mode. Luke greatly admires his father after he sacrificed his life to evacuate civilians, leading him to join the Special Forces to combat terrorism. However, after a friendly match with Guile, Luke indicated that the service did not provide him with the satisfaction he desired. Encouraged by Colonel Guile, he decided to pursue his own journey in competitive fighting. Luke has a cocky and youthful demeanor, backed by a strong will. After leaving the army to follow the path of mixed martial arts, Luke's desire to see the world and fight strong opponents makes him not take matches too seriously, even making video game references in his winning quotes. However, he respects individuals with similar mindsets like Ryu, Ken, Akira, and still admires his military leader Guile. In the sixth installment, Luke takes on a more serious and balanced role as a coach at the Backer Academy. He is described as a young character facing off against the traditional teacher. Voice actor Alec Lee deliberately lowered his voice between games, stating that Luke traveled the world between Street Fighter V and VI, where he humbled himself after losing to different opponents and dedicated himself to training. Luke's quotes against most fighters also show this evolution, as he becomes more respectful to his opponents as long as they also enjoy the fight. According to character designer Konami Fujioka, Luke was prepared to be a Ryu for the new generation. He was designed to be a clear and easily relatable main character without too many curves, compared to Ryu. His disproportionately large hands aim to emphasize the strength of his upper body and punching power, in contrast to Jimmy's kicks. Formerly Luke's superior in the United States Army, despite Luke's somewhat moody younger position often conflicting with Guile's stern and disciplined personality, the two still maintain a good relationship. Even after Luke left the army, he still highly respects his former superior and addresses Guile as if he is still under his command. The two maintain a teacher-student relationship and occasionally compete. Luke initially believes that Ken is a monster, after amnesia footage labeled him as a terrorist. As the head of security for the Nash tournament, he leads a team to pursue the fugitive Ken. After working as a Mel Masters escort, he also believes that Ken is an unfit father for betraying his son's trust. Luke can't help but compare their relationship to that between him and his deceased father, which sometimes overwhelms him with sadness and anger, as well as sympathy for Mel. While the two continue to fight each other in the arena, Luke eventually learns that Ken was framed. Luke takes on the role of a young escort and later becomes a friend. Mel feels somewhat melancholic about the travel plans imposed by his father Ken, and Mel resists Luke's attempts to cheer him up on their way to Nash. However, they eventually became friends, and according to the World Tour status, they still stay in touch. After being deceived by JP into being the true mastermind behind the Nash incident, Luke considers him a significant threat. A rival to Luke since childhood. While both are usually laid back and positive, they also strongly clash with each other as they both share hot-headed behavior. Luke and Jimmy will argue and taunt each other for trivial reasons, such as accidentally colliding with each other. Luke mocks Jimmy as the pretty boy, while Jimmy calls Luke a chunk of meat or dumb. However, their rivalry is not malicious, as Luke and Jimmy simply want to respect each other's fighting skills and acknowledge that they are the best between the two. Luke's past is mostly unknown, although it seems he lived alone with his father, Robert Sullivan, who was initially considered a quiet and reserved person. Luke remembers his father, who suddenly rushed to work to evacuate civilians in a shopping center upon discovering a terrorist-planted bomb, sacrificing himself while protecting others. After the attack, Luke chose to join the army to fight terrorism, although he found himself dissatisfied with his line of work. During training using a sandbag, Guile visits Luke and challenges him to a quick sparring match. Guile reveals that Luke asked him for a face-off to fulfill his desire to leave the army. After Luke expresses doubts about the path his life has taken, Guile tells him he knows people like Luke who chose to fight their battles elsewhere. The two raise a toast to the late Robert and Luke's new path in life, where Luke aims to become a man just like his father. In Street Fighter VI, Luke plays a significant role. Using his military background, Luke, a contractor at PMC, teaches mixed martial arts. He spends his days eating fast food, playing video games on his computer, and fighting, but make no mistake, Luke plays to win. In the first chapter, Luke meets Mel Masters and accompanies him to Nash. Luke tells Mel how the world gets bigger, but Mel disagrees, stating that the world is getting smaller. It takes only one day for them to reach Nash, a newly independent country in the depths of the Asian mountains, a place unfamiliar to Luke's friends. Luke corrects Mel, out of concern, about the phone call between Mel and his father. Suddenly, Ken Masters informs them that Mel is safe, and their arrival in Nashoushik, offering to take his son to the venue before the rehearsal begins. After the call ends, Luke asks Mel if he had to abandon other plans because of this trip. Mel answers, sort of, dismissing it as unimportant. Luke teases Mel about having a girlfriend and tries to befriend him in a mobile game they both play. Mel reminds Luke that he needs to prepare for the concert and does not make friends with newcomers. Luke tries to be funny by howling like a wolf, and Mel reminds him that wolves usually don't attack people. Luke and his father saw them in the mountains of Alaska during another tournament there. Then Mel gives Luke a piece of fruit and a pocket knife, claiming that he'll be the man on any camping trip if he masters knife usage. In the second chapter, Luke tells Mel that they will arrive soon. Mel sighs only, and he seems frustrated. They enter JP's press conference to open the Nash Martial Arts Tournament, which is now ending. However, the hacker group known as Amnesia disrupts the event and broadcasts footage of Ken Masters secretly colluding with terrorists. Everyone, including Luke and Mel, is shocked. Luke tells Mel that they need to leave to ensure their safety. In the city, upset about the memory loss allegations, Luke tells his boss that Mel's phone calls with his father will not be contacted. Luke is told that they are actively investigating the allegations against Ken and found out that Ken's car was attacked, which angered Luke. He asks if Ken is a terrorist, but they can't determine if the attack was a double attack or organized to cover his escape. In either case, they decide to sever ties with Ken. Luke feels disappointed because Ken is their agent, but his boss reminds him that their only clients are the Nash government and the Terra Partners network. Then Luke is ordered to return to headquarters with assurances that they will continue to take care of Mel. In the third chapter, Luke's boss and JP summarize the situation for Luke and the rest of the security team. The protection of Nash's residents became their top priority as long as Ken remained on the run. Despite the dubious credibility of Amnesia's leaks, they could still provide a perfect pretext for other countries to intervene. To avoid an international crisis, the Nash government will issue two statements: the tournament will take place tomorrow, and Ken Masters is involved with terrorists. Luke, looking at Mel, remembers the day his father sacrificed himself to save him and other innocent bystanders years ago. Fueled by this memory, Luke requests permission to lead a team of 3 in the hope of capturing Ken. Mel insists that his father is innocent, but Luke must embark on his new mission. Luke and Mel shake hands, with Luke wishing they could play the mobile game together. Mel tries to return Luke's pocket knife, but Luke insists that Mel keep it. Upon leaving the building, Luke receives a notification that Mel has accepted his friendship request. After a bomb explodes in a crowded market, Luke notices an abandoned mobile phone on the ground. It has been turned into a transmitter that triggered the explosion. As more drones spread, Luke warns his team and civilians that the modified drones could be explosive devices. He orders the area to be cordoned off, with no one touching the landed drones. One of Luke's men discovers they can track the transmitter source, and it's nearby. Later, Luke locates Ken and confronts him. Suddenly, a loud noise distracts everyone, and an unidentified woman jumps out of the shadows. She grabs Ken in an attempt to escape. Luke fires at the woman's shoulder, but they still manage to escape miraculously through a window. However, Luke and his team decide to end the pursuit of the fugitives. Instead, they focus on a more urgent discovery: a map with targets for additional drone attacks. In the fourth chapter, Luke updates his boss. His team identified the terrorists' operations base, where the drones were modified, and helped someone, possibly Ken, escape, even though that person might be injured. Luke's boss explains that the 2 exploded drones were stolen, and the other drones are still missing. He orders all drones, including private ones, to be grounded for now, as they currently work with local police to track their locations, though finding them all in one day is challenging. Luke also mentions that the tournament will start within 2 hours, and he needs to allow the police to find Ken. In the arena, when Ken confronts JP, Luke orders his men to stop shooting. He doesn't want to lose Mel and his father too. Luke advises Ken to step down. JP expresses his disappointment in Ken, telling him they will take good care of his son. Angry, Ken rushes towards JP, attacking and injuring Luke's right eye. Luke tells Ken that, as a national hero, he loves to play dirty, accusing him of conspiring with terrorists. Ken, in turn, accuses Luke of not knowing anything. Luke agrees, pointing out that the only thing he knows for sure is that he doesn't spare monsters like Ken. King Sherry and the audience cheer for Luke. Mel rushes toward the stage to get closer to the two. Luke reveals that his father was in the army and was killed by terrorists like Ken. He also tells Ken that he betrayed Mel, but he'll be able to see his son again once he surrenders. Ken refuses, needing Mel to see his father fight to the end. Luke apologizes to Ken for the injury and offers him a free shot. This unleashes Luke's power. He exclaims loudly, "Damn it! Why do all fathers always act this way?" before delivering a powerful blow. The two continue to fight. Ken defeats Luke, but he eventually surrenders, and he is apprehended. Luke introduces himself to the player and recounts his dramatic background. After leaving the U.S. Army, Luke worked as a private military contractor to make a living. He later resigned from his job at PMC to become an MMA coach and entered the world of street fighting. Luke is somewhat unsure about the exact reason behind his decision to dedicate his life to street fighting. Nevertheless, he often recalls the fighter's definition someone once told him, stating that a fighter is someone who fights on their own terms. According to Luke, this is the reason that drove him to devote himself to refining his combat skills, hoping to meet someone who shares the same mentality in life. As Luke narrates his previous encounters with the best of the best, he accidentally collides with Jimmy. The two fighters stare at each other, seemingly failing to recognize one another. Luke looks at Jimmy with anticipation, indicating that the one who made the mistake should apologize. In response, Jimmy says he is waiting for Luke's apology while describing himself as someone not the type to stir up a stink over nothing. Angry, they exchange insults before engaging in a brawl. After the fight concludes, the two men continue arguing. The fighter's definition comes to Luke's mind once again. He has no doubt in his belief that anyone who calls themselves a fighter walks the same path and gives it their all. He reaffirms his commitment to respecting the art of combat and every new opponent. However, in the context of his current battle with Jimmy, he laughs and admits, "I'm not sure I've changed that much from the kid I used to be," getting into back alley brawls. In a matching panel, young versions of Luke and Jimmy are superimposed on their adult bodies, suggesting that the rivalry extends back to childhood. It also appears as if both immediately revert to a childlike state upon being in each other's presence. After Ryu's personal monologue about his journey, Luke approaches him and requests a friendly match. He asks Ryu about the purpose of the fight. Luke confesses that he doesn't have one, he just wants to take shots at anyone stronger than him. Ryu chuckles quietly but agrees and begins winning. Luke wakes up from the knockout blow, holding his head with one hand and his mobile phone with the other. He expresses disappointment that Ryu left before he could take a picture with him. Nevertheless, he is still content with the picture he got of Ryu walking away at sunset. In a military base, with a towel around his shoulders, Luke expresses his always being happy to train with Guile. Guile reminds him that fighting with the young man sometimes keeps him on his toes. When Luke asks Guile what he wants to discuss, the conversation turns to Luke's time in Nash. When asked for his opinion, Luke firmly states that Ken is innocent of terrorism allegations, confirming what Guile has always believed about his son-in-law. The rest of Guile's story revolves around his thoughts on the situation and a secret meeting with Ken.